No, the camera thinks that something's off. Okay, you won't see my charming face, I guess, for some time. Anywho, without further ado, hey, as Sarp said, I'm István Juhos from Circuit, and I'll tell you some practical tips and tricks to improve your Compose previews. Okay, let's get started. First, for you slide fanatics, I'll keep this slide on for a couple of seconds. If you want to scan it, please scan it, or you can just go to Speaker Deck and check me out. Slides are already up there. So again, a couple of more seconds if you want to scan it. 3, 2, 1. Okay, check Speaker Deck if you haven't scanned it. With that out of the way, let's start with some food for thought. Okay, I promise this will be the only XML code in this presentation that you will see. The food for thought. When we wrote an XML layout as easy as this really nothing special list item, what we got in Android Studio for 10 plus years is a free preview on the right side. So that's quite all right. That was kind of free. If you wrote your layout properly, then you got a preview. In contrast, with Compose, if we do write the same list item with composables, with quite short composable there, what we get in the preview pane is, well, nothing out of the box. What we have to do is to write something like this, a really simple preview, list item preview with the app theme called and the list item there parameterized, and the preview annotation slapped on top of the composable annotation on this function. What we get with this is, well, something like that, a nice little preview that we can see the composable rendered there. Everything's fine. Okay, but what we had to do for this is we had to write some code. And code that will probably, hopefully, never reach production, provided that you have R8 enabled and you don't use these composable preview functions anywhere else in your code base. But let's say they will never reach production. But others will definitely read it, and others or you will have to maintain it at some point if the composable that you're previewing is changed or needs some updates. Also, this code might be duplicated if you've done some fancy things in your previews, came up with some really neat solutions, then those code parts might be duplicated inside a larger code base. Someone thinks that, well, that's a cool idea, let's copy it over there. And if it turns out it's not a really cool idea or not that cool of an idea, that might get you into some trouble, or not, of course. And also this preview code or preview code in general might be used for other purposes, like creating a showcase for your design system, or doing screenshot tests, and so on and so forth. We will see examples for those as well. Okay, a short agenda. I'll be talking about developer experience related to previews, limitation of the annotations that we use, mostly the preview annotation, and building some custom tooling. Also, I will be talking about these in the context of Jetpack Compose and its related tooling Android Studio, but not just that. I will touch some Compose multi-platform stuff and its currently designated IDE fleet. Okay, the first tip that I'd like to show you is, well, it's good to consider IDE themes. Let's see what that actually means. Okay, so sorry for the bright light. We will get through it quickly. So this is the same list item code, nothing special here, but a developer wrote this code while using the light theme. There are people out there, probably some amongst you as well, who love the light theme for some strange reason and only use that. That's okay, of course. But we will see how that can get into the mix. Okay, so while writing this simple list item composable, the developer who wrote it thought about overdraw on our layouts. So as this is a list item, list items are usually used in the context of some other layout, probably a column or a lazy column that already provide the background colors or the backgrounds at all for their content. So it makes sense to just omit the background from this row composable of the list item and just let the container give the background color to our elements. That's perfectly fine. That's a good optimization as well. But the same developer using the light theme wrote the preview for this composable as well. Again, same code, just using the light theme. And what they got in their preview plane is well, this nice preview that we've seen before. Really good, looks very nice. Nothing wrong with that. The developer who implemented this whole thing commits the code, pushes it up to the repository, and forgets about it. Then comes the dark theme lover developer and views the same composable preview and sees this. Of course, depending on the theme, this could be enough contrasty or not so contrasty. It would definitely not display well on a black background, right? So depending on what kind of dark theme the other developer is using, they might not see or perceive the preview as intended. This is not a big issue on this small kind of preview and a small list item, but for a whole screen that only has black text and some input fields and some other like gray subtext and so on and so forth might not be a good developer experience. So what we can do, we can add this show background parameter to our preview annotation. We can set it to true. It's a simple Boolean. And what this does is that just only in the preview itself gives our preview a background. This only applies to the preview window itself. So our actual list item is not bothered with this, and nor the theme. Also, this show background tool, our show background parameter, doesn't take into consideration the theme at all that we're using inside the composable. But suddenly, this list item preview becomes much more convenient to preview for any people who are using any theme in their IDEs. Perfect. But there are actually more annotation parameters that we can use in the preview annotation. Let me try that again. Okay, that didn't work. Okay, back to annotation parameters. So there are more of these. Let's see how we can use those. Let's get back to our previous example. We have the show background set to true, and but we want to manipulate that background color. We don't have any control over it with just setting the show background to true. But what we can do is set the background color to a specified constant color. Here is a downside of preview being an annotation. All of its parameters need to be build time constants. So we can't add variables there. We can't reference composables there. They have to be constant values, build time constant values to be precise. Okay, so we can add a color there, and the actual background color of the composable changed, but it's a slight change. It's from white to a slight grayish color. And well, it's pretty hard to parse those colors by eye, so we can add some hints there. For example, as you can see in this comment, a gray W500 value, this we can reference something like that in a comment there. So let's say that gray W500 value is coming from our color system or our design system's color system. So we have some grasp on what that constant color value actually means. Another idea that we can do is just move this to an actual constant value that we name, and then we can use that name, the name of the constant, as the background color's value reference. The good part of this is that those constants usually already exist in your project or your design system's color system. So we can easily reuse those values, and probably the other developers already working in the same code base can also put those into place and know what those things are. Great. Okay, but what if we want to preview our list item in the dark mode? There is the UI mode parameter. We can set all the different configuration flags on that. The easiest way is the configuration UI mode night yes. If we set it to that, then our preview will be rendered as if the preview was run on a device or an emulator that is set to dark mode. Great, but our list item is set up in a way that in light mode, the foreground color is black, and in dark mode, the foreground color is white. And as you can see, again, we lost some contrast because the background that we set didn't change by us setting the preview to dark mode. That's the same constant, the same background color value. So there is no change there. What we can do here is we can create multiple previews, one for a dark mode, one for a light mode. For the dark mode one, we can say the background color is dark gray, and there we can set the UI mode configuration. And with this, we can get multiple previews. Again, that's awesome. We can have a proper dark mode and proper light mode preview. Of course, dark gray should be something that's coming from our color system or design system's color system as well. Okay, let's do some summary on preview annotation parameters. The preview annotation coming from the androidx.compose.ui.tooling.preview package is what we've seen so far. It has parameters. It has much more. We don't really have time to touch now. But of course, this annotation is understood and rendered and properly handled by Unreal Studio and Compose and Jetpack Compose preview tooling. Great. Unfortunately, it's not the case with Compose multi-platform. The preview annotation coming from the JetBrains Compose UI tooling preview package doesn't have any parameters implemented yet. And because of that, of course, Fleet is not able to parse any of those parameters anyway. So yeah, this is the case currently. Hopefully that will change in the future. Okay, another idea. Let's group our previews because we've already had 2. We can have more. So back to our really simple example. And we start to use some other preview parameters that are available with Jetpack Compose. The new things here are name and group. We can name our previews with any name. Of course, it makes sense for them to make sense, to be humanly readable and to mean something. So for these 2 previews, one's name is light primary and the other's name is dark primary. One refers to light mode and primary background, and the other refers to dark mode and primary background as well. We can group these together with the group parameter. These are string parameters. Unfortunately, again, they have to be constant values. And this group's name is light/dark primary. That means that these will belong to the light, dark kind of previews with the primary background. This is all made up by me, so you can name them whatever you want. They just have to make sense so that others will understand it as well. Okay, some minor modifications. We can add 2 more preview annotations to the same preview composable. This time it's light secondary and dark secondary, and the group name is light/dark secondary. What we achieve with this is that we use all of the 4 previously shown previews together on a preview composable. We get those for different previews. Probably the screen doesn't give it justice, but those are actual different primary and secondary background colors. I copied these from our design system and color system from circuits. So unfortunately on this background, they don't really give much contrast, but believe me, those are different primary and secondary background colors. Okay, what we get with the grouping, because we're talking with grouping, is that this button and a small drop down in Android Studio's tooling window. And with this, we can filter out the previews to see only one group of previews. Quite handy if you have a multitude of previews. This is a really small example with just 2 groups, but you can group these previews together by screen sizes or font sizes or dark light, as in this example, and so on and so forth. So however you like, Android Studio will pick it up, will create groups of them, and you can filter by them. Pretty neat. Okay, we already created a multitude of previews, but we can also create multi-previews to make the reusability thing with our previews all over our project. So back to our example, 4 different preview annotations with different parameter settings and the 4 previews on the right. Okay, what we can do is we can separate these previews. So these are the light dark primary previews, and we can add these previews onto another annotation class, which we can call any way we want. But in this example, it's preview primary background. That means primary dark and primary light. Why not? Whatever we like to do in our projects. We can do the same thing with the secondary preview annotations, as a name of preview secondary background. Why not? And with this, we can simplify our preview with using just these 2 annotations on it, the preview primary background, preview secondary background, and these annotations become really easily reusable all over your project and to be shared with other developers as well, of course. The funny thing is that because these are just annotations and the only limit is how Kotlin, or actually Java, defines how annotations work, we can also annotate another annotation class with these annotations. So the multi-preview becomes a part of another multi-preview, and we can actually do this. Why not? If you need the primary background preview somewhere, you can use that separately. You can use the other, or you can use both. This just all comes down to how you want to arrange your tooling in your project. Okay. Great thing is that there are some multi-preview templates predefined in the Android X tooling, so the Jetpack Compose tooling. There is preview light dark, which you can use freely in your code. The obvious issue here is that multi-preview annotations can't have parameters because of how annotations work. So setting the background is not an option here. But if you just jump into the code of preview light dark, it's an Android X library coming with Compose. So you can just jump in the code and copy stuff over as you would do anyway. And you can get inspiration from how these preview annotations are put together. Okay, moving on. There is preview font scale, which gives us a couple of predefined font scales that users might set on their devices. But of course, to improve the visibility, let's switch to light mode so that you can see these. So these are named as well, just as the light dark ones are. And you can filter for these as well because the group is set on the different annotations that this multi-preview annotation aggregates. There is also a funky one called preview screen sizes, which gives you a couple of predefined devices that the preview will be rendered on with the border and all the device UI there. So again, you can copy paste these configurations. You can add new ones on your own and on your own preview annotations, and so on and so forth. So you can just play around with these, do your own combinations that make sense for your project and your UIs. There is a fourth one actually called preview dynamic colors. So if you're at the awesome stage that the dynamic color handling is your worst problem in your project, you can have the dynamic color previews as well and configured and so on and so forth. But we don't have time for that to go into details, so that's homework for you. Okay, again, the summary. multi-preview templates in the Android X Compose library with Jetpack Compose. They are there. They are defined there, actually. And as normal multi-preview annotations, Android Studio picks them up, renders them, and they can be filtered, and so on and so forth. So that's great. But of course, unfortunately, in Compose multi-platform, even though you can slap multiple preview annotations on an annotation class, because that's how annotations work in Kotlin, you can do that, but the tooling itself doesn't pick it up yet. Unfortunately, hopefully it will improve in the future. And of course, those templates are not available because of this either. Okay, the next topic is let's build custom tools for our previews, because why not? Okay, here's a new example that we will be looking at. This is just a normal primary button with an icon and a text. You don't have to parse it. You will see previews of it shortly. So let's build a preview for this primary button. We slap the preview light dark multi-preview annotation there, because we want to see a dark and a light mode preview of our button, because it's a main component of our UI. We just call the primary button composable in the preview function, and what we get are two of the same buttons. Something's not right there, right? Something's missing. What's missing from here? Probably you could already see the issue. The issue is the app theme. So I talked with a lot of people who wrote a lot of previews, and the common issue is that they constantly forget to add the app theme to their previews, and because of that, the preview, of course, acts strange. Some default colors sneak into the mix. And of course, I do the same mistake all over every time, pretty much. So what we can do is make it easier to not forget these things that are common in most of the previews. And of course, this lacks some flexibility as well, because we're using multi-preview annotations. So the Compose multi-platform tooling would have some issues there, but let's not talk about that here. That's not the point. So let's build some tools to actually get more out of our previews. The easiest approach would be to build a box that we use in previews. So we call it a preview box, where we can set some default things, or where we can customize our previews pretty much in a platform agnostic way. So preview box itself would look something like this. Again, a simple box that where we call the app theme, and we call the content trailing lambda there. And of course, at this point, we traded app theme for another composable that we only use in previews. So this is not a good trade-off yet, but we're getting there. So because we're building a box, why not build a box inside of it? Why not delegate stuff to that box inside that? We can do that. And with this, we can also set a background color. Why not? We're in a composable function. We're just writing normal composables at this point. And we can set a background color on that box. With this approach, we can circumvent the limitations of the preview annotation and start building our own in-composition stuff there. So if we add the background color, we can easily define that. We can call color. We can retrieve colors from our app theme definition or theme definition, and we can just set it as a background color of that box. And now we have a background color mechanism that is independent from the preview annotations and toolings mechanisms. But there is an issue here again, because calling this is usually composition local, right? In most theme setups. So the colors itself there, the colors call, is a composition local access, depending, of course, on how your project is set up. And because of that, if you read this composition local here, it might have a default value, might not have any value, might cause the preview to crash, and so on and so forth. So yeah, to just see what can happen there, let's delve into some theme insights. So this is usually how themes are built in Compose. There is a material theme or your own theme built on material theme or a completely custom theme. The thing is usually that you want to retrieve some stuff from your theme definition, and usually there is an object for that which gives you easy access and global access to some composition locals like this. This is pretty much copy pasted from material themes definition and file, so this is pretty standard stuff. And of course, for this, you have to have a composition local somewhere to be able to provide that. And by default, that composition local, if not defined in your theme or anywhere else in your composition, might just throw an error if it's uninitialized, signaling that you're doing something wrong and you should see what you're doing wrong. Or it can just provide the default value like material theme does with light colors. Why not? The thing is that this, at the point of writing your preview tooling, might not be in your control. And if you go back to our preview box example, what we can do to mitigate this issue is that we can defer the reading of that composition local by making this a composable function instead of just a color value. And of course, calling that composable in place in the background modifier in this example makes that read deferred to that point where that background modifier enters the composition. And at that point, because we are already inside the scope of the app theme, which defines those colors and composition locals we need, we can use this like that. Oh, and my camera just realized that I'm speaking. Cool. Okay, and with this, if we use preview box around our primary button preview, you can already see that we actually have a box that has a background color that's coming from our theme. So this way, the semantics, the context is clearer than just having constant values there in the preview annotation. So we're already at a better place now. Of course, because this is a box, we can start just putting things out that the box is capable of, like adding padding values and just calling them in the box and having padding around the components. And of course, nothing prevents us from creating not just a box, but maybe a column. Why not? Or a row, or a lazy layout, or whatever you'd like in your tooling to be able to use. Okay, some hints about overriding composition locals inside previews. So back to our preview column example that we could see before, we can also add some global settings or some layout modification settings or environment settings there. In this example, layout direction, because why not? And we can override any composition local at any point in our composition. So we can do that in our preview tooling composables as well, of course. And this way, if we override local layout direction, by default, it will be left to right. But if we start to use it, we can easily add the layout direction setting as RTL in our preview column, and instantly the preview will be easily previewable in right to left layouts. Of course, you can do this with the preview annotation, but as soon as you're using multi-preview annotations, you lose that capability. And yeah, pretty much that's it. You have to juggle with some trade-offs here and there. Of course, this works with Jetpack Compose and Android Studio, pretty much standard Jetpack Compose stuff. And if we remove that that pesky multi-preview annotation and just use the normal preview annotation from Compose multi-platform and JetBrains' Compose tooling, this also works flawlessly in Compose multi-platform previews as well. All of the previously shown preview tooling actually does. I mean, preview box, preview column, preview whatever you'd like to implement. So we have more flexibility now as well. Okay, here are some more ideas that we don't have time to deeply delve in, but I found them during investigating the topic of this talk. What we can do is we can also check the behavior of components in interactive mode in Unreal Studio on our previews. This doesn't work with Fleet yet, but this is a screen from Circuits app, actually, that I recently refactored, and it's a quite interactable screen. And if you set up your state right in the preview, then you can also do the interactive preview and just check out if your layout works as expected, even with some extra features like drawing on a signing screen. Another idea, use previews for preliminary accessibility checks. Of course, this is the main territory of designers to check, but it doesn't hurt if you spot some issues as well, if there are any. Going back to the same screen, there is an option that you can click on the preview tooling window, and it does a preliminary accessibility check on multiple form factors, light mode, dark mode, and so on and so forth, that you can consider if it needs some attention or not. Okay, there is the thing called preview parameter provider, which we don't have time for now. But yeah, you can generate different previews by providing a stream of different objects that the preview tooling will generate previews for. And with that, you can give you can create multiple states that you want to preview. But there is the idea of providing composables as preview parameters, because why not? You can do that. You can create all different configurations with that. And there is actually a great article from Katie Barnett about that. So check that out if you're into the preview parameter provider stuff. Also, if you have a design system, which you probably have if your app is big enough, it makes sense to create a component showcase for that, either by hand or with the library, for example, showcase. There are a couple other libraries like that out there, and there are a couple more in the works. I pretty much know that for sure. But Airbnb's showcase is pretty popular, where you can generate these showcase screens from your preview functions. Also, you can use your previews for screenshot testing. There are a couple of libraries again for this, but there is an official one coming up still in experimental stage, which is Compose Preview screenshot testing. Try it out if you haven't, or yeah, just compare it with the tools that you're already using for Compose-based screenshot testing. Or a really big idea that I got from talking with a really nice guy called Slisky Code at DroidCon Berlin a couple of weeks ago. This nice engineer wrote a whole app that can work, or well, pretty much a feature that can work in isolation in previews. They mocked use cases, they mocked view models, and the whole feature multiple screens with navigation and different state handling and all the different states. Everything works as on device, but only in Unreal Studio and in preview. So again, you could write the whole app to be compatible to be run in Compose Preview, because that's just a stripped down Android, in fact. So why not? With that, wrapping up, I've shown a lot of things here that that relate to previews. That is code in Compose that you have to write, that you have to spend your time on, and other people have to spend time on reviewing it. So there is a lot of time and effort involved in previews if you want to do them right. So is it worth it? And the answer, as always, it depends. It depends on how much time you have, how deep you want to go, and how fancy you want to have your previews. With that, here are some resources I used to create this presentation. And yeah, check them out. There are some documentation there, and also some articles that I really recommend you to check out. And with that, summing up everything, compose previews are code, take care of that code, others will read that code. Simplify previews as much as possible, but go wild if you need to do something to make your life easier. And of course, to make your life easier, you can create custom reusable tools to improve your compose previews. And if you only use those tools in previews and you don't use your preview functions anywhere else just for the preview tooling itself, then R8 will get those call chains out of your release code base anyway. With that, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them, and I'll probably see them on screen. Any questions? Okay, what are my thoughts on AI tools on Android developers? Let's be real. Okay, this talk wasn't about AI tools, but I do actually use GitHub Copilot to write some Compose code, if that helps. I'm not really deep into AI tools, to be honest, and this is not a Gemini talk. Next question, I see it on YouTube. How to preview composables with network images? Great question. In fact, any kind of image loaded from somewhere. Network loaded images. First thing that comes to my mind is that for previews, you can use the is in edit mode. I'm not sure I'm getting it correctly, but is in edit mode composition local, and that can tell you if your composable is rendered inside the preview tooling or not. And if you have to load network images, you can just in your production composable, you can just check if you're in edit mode and just display a static image there in preview. That's quite easy. That could be the solution for every dynamic content that you don't know at the time of the preview rendering. Just fake it.
Well, thank you for your answer, István. And please, no questions for my circumstances. I mean, it was a really long day for me, and this really is the final straw. Yes. I hope people enjoyed. I really did enjoy it, your talk at least. But well, any last words or any other questions?
I don't see any more questions. So thank you very much for
It is
listening and
my
being here.